Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about the streets beneath the streets. And our focus is primarily going to be on northern England, but we're also going to do an update later in the video about Melbourne and some of their buried street levels as well. So let's start by looking at this house, Gloucester House, which is in Stockton in England. And what's interesting about this particular site is that it is approximately 250 years old according to the official history, so that puts it towards the later part of the 1700s. But they were doing restoration to this particular house and they uncovered something fairly interesting. Basically, they found a street beneath the street, and they found what was described as tiny homes and secret tunnels discovered underneath Stockton. So there were some interesting photographs from this particular site, and the owner of Gloucester House, he said that the underground living quarters used to have access to street level. So at one point, the street level would have been a lot lower than it is today. But now this is in the basement. And just some photos from the article, and you can just see how the homes and passages still have original wooden window frames, solid doors, and cavities to hold candles. Now again, all of this was rediscovered. It was lost to history, even though this Gloucester House dates back to the late 1700s. And once again, just another image, but as mentioned, the mysterious labyrinth once had street level access, and no recorded history appears to exist for the dwellings or the occupants. So it's just this lost history once again, and this level below the current grade. And I just wanted to sort of highlight some of these things. And there was a map put together in this article talking about Stockton's secret underground tunnel network. And readers contributed to the article, and they were able to piece together some of this tunnel network that they think exists. So you have this Trinity Church, which I think it still exists, but I believe there was an arson in the 90s. But this network of underground tunnels goes to this church. And this woman, as a younger child, she went to the basement of this pub and she found this entrance to the tunnel, and she was able to walk a portion of this particular tunnel. But she went back there recently and they took a photo, and it's bricked up. Yeah, so there's this whole network underneath the city, and there's obviously been rumors of these tunnels, and I'm sure a lot of people have ventured into them. But it's just the lack of records as to actually who built it, when was it built. I'm not questioning the ability of people to build tunnels. It's just, when did it all happen? There seems to be a discontinuity. Interestingly, you have this layer of pretty impressive architecture that's sitting on top of these tunnels. Now, another one of these sites was Stockton Castle. Now, I don't believe we truly know what this castle would have looked like, but in 1967, there were archaeological excavations done, and here is just a photo. But yeah, just interesting. And the early history of Stockton is largely from the late 1700s. From the end of the 18th century, the Industrial Revolution changed Stockton from a small and quiet market town into a flourishing center of heavy industry. So a lot of its history derives from the late 1700s, yet you have this unknown element to the city. So it's interesting. And I just wanted to point out that, yeah, the UK, I believe, shows evidence of at least two destructive events, in my view. I think the first destructive event, I think we can associate it with the Roman Empire, or what we are told is the Roman Empire, because you can find buried Roman sites all throughout the UK, including Exeter Cathedral in Exeter in England. And I think in early 1970s, they found underneath the cathedral, about 10 feet deep, they found these Roman baths. And all throughout England, you find buried Roman villas and many other sites. Now, I personally believe that the history we're given for what the Roman Empire is largely misleading. Again, that's my view, but I don't think that there was this gradual fall. I chalk it up more to a major destructive event. Now, this more recent event that I think happened and can be witnessed in the UK. I think another example of that would be in Derwentcote in Durham County. And there was an episode of a TV program called Time Team, which is, I believe, based in the UK, but they did an archaeological excavation at this particular site, which is both a mining and industrial site, but it dates to the early part of the 1700s. And there's this steel furnace, which is a relic from the earliest days of the Industrial Revolution. And we're told it was built in the 1730s to convert wrought iron into steel using a process known as cementation. So the Time Team, I believe they were there in 2010. And according to the official history, this particular site, it fell into disrepair in the mid 1800s. But again, it's buried like 5 to 10 feet. And cultural layers and overgrowth, you wouldn't get anywhere near that amount in less than 200 years. So in here, this woman is excavating this particular area, and then you can see that underneath that dirt, she came across this floor, and just a really interesting site. So I think a lot of the findings were put together in this paper, and they're just showing you another view of this was a cottage associated with the site, showing the fireplace and that floor once again. So just an interesting site. This is just a crucible furnace, and you can see an excavator up here, but just largely buried. And yeah, I think this is evidence of a more recent destructive event. And we're being told this is all from the early 1700s, but I'm not even sure that's accurate. I think it's from an older period. I don't know exactly when that would be, but I think it's more recent than what we're seeing with the buried Roman sites in the UK. And the reason largely why I think that, especially with regards to this site, is because of a lot of these stamped bricks that at least I attribute to a more recent period anyway. Now, I did want to do just a quick couple of updates since we're talking about buried levels. And we're going to shift our focus back to Melbourne, Australia, to talk about the unexpected buried blocks. It's a bit Pompeii-like, and again, a lot of excavations were done in 2017, I believe, and during those excavations, the archaeologists came across a lot of these buried sites that were once residences, and they found buried fireplaces and things like this. And I think this particular image correlates to number 7 here on this particular map, and I think this is the central business district of Melbourne. But in the early 1920s, they were digging the foundations for what would become the Capitol Theatre, and they actually discovered this picket fence buried underneath clay, well below the current grade or street level. Now, there's an update coming here, but I just wanted to refresh. So there were articles coming out like, why are these 1860s houses buried on Lonsdale Street? Now again, I'm starting to come to the opinion that the dates aren't lining up with this at all, and what we're looking at, it's a lot older. I don't know exactly where to put it, but it might line up with some of those buried sites we're seeing in the UK, the more recent ones. And it's like this early industrial period, but the official history with these sites is that in the late 1850s or 1860s, the city council, because of flooding, decided to raise the street levels. So people were just quite literally forced from their residences. And if they didn't get out in time, the city council would just deposit all this clay in these areas. So you had this limited amount of time to get out. So they find a bunch of artifacts associated with these sites. And in 2014, actually before the buried blocks were found, they found this buried iron foundry. Even though Melbourne was founded in 1835, this iron foundry, we're told, was up and running by 1842. And just an interesting find, but its location is very close to a lot of these other buried blocks. But the update is with another structure which is less than 2 kilometers away from that buried iron foundry, and it's the Stork Hotel. Now, this historic hotel. I think it was actually demolished in 2013, 2014, I believe, somewhere thereabouts. But associated with this site, there was an archaeological excavation in 2014. And at that time, they determined that there was no evidence that was found that would indicate that the basement was ever at street level. So up until 2014, they were saying that this building, the basement, just was a normal basement. It never opened to the street. But in this report put out by the Heritage Council in 2021, they have updated that. And let's get to this graphic here. According to the Heritage Council, in light of the results of the more recent excavations of the Wesleyan site, and in light of the historical information, it would appear that the Stork Hotel and the adjacent sites are examples of deep early filling events which took place in the mid to late 1850s. So I think we're told like this Stork Hotel was built in and around 1850, yet they're intentionally raising the street levels in and around it. But up to 2014, they were saying there was no evidence that the street levels were raised in this particular instance. So they've reversed their thought on this particular structure after further excavation. So I just wanted to mention, we see a lot of structures that look like this, and we're told they just have typical cellars or basements, but you never know. I just wanted to point that out. So I think that's about it for today. Just a couple quick updates there, and a lot of our focus was on the UK in the early part of the video, just sort of highlighting this discontinuity in our timeline from my perspective. So I think I'll leave it there for today, but once again, I want to give a big shout out to all my patrons. Your help and support is always greatly appreciated, and I thank you very much. So with that said, until next time, take care. Bye.